Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going meta, even for us.
Oh.
We're diving into something called personal epistemological development.
Okay.
Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but stick with me.
I'm intrigued.
Basically, we're talking about how people develop their beliefs about knowledge and knowing.
It's a fascinating area.
Think of it as figuring out how we figure things out.
I like that.
It's like we're becoming detectives of our own minds.
Right.
So to crack this case, we've got a stack of academic research.
Okay.
Mainly a 1997 article by Hofer and Pintrich.
I've read that one.
It's a deep dive into all sorts of theories in this field.
A classic.
Our mission today is to give you a solid overview of those major theories.
Sounds good.
We'll highlight what makes each one unique.
Great.
And even touch on some of the ongoing debates in the field.
I'm ready.
So it's like we're getting a crash course in how humans become knowers.
Yeah, you could say that.
Sounds intense.
It can be.
But honestly, why should anyone care about this?
Good question.
What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, it might seem abstract, but understanding this stuff can actually help you reflect on your own learning journey.
You mean like how I learn?
Exactly.
How do I approach new information? How do I form opinions?
It's all connected.
This stuff is relevant in school, at work, even just navigating life's everyday puzzles.
It's everywhere.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is a deep dive worthy topic.
Good.
So, no one's cracked the code on the way this all works, right?
Right.
There are multiple models, each with a different perspective.
Exactly.
It's like having different lenses for viewing the same complex landscape.
I like that analogy.
Each model offers its own valuable insights.
For sure.
All right, let's try on some of these lenses.
Okay.
First up, we've got Perry's scheme from 1970.
Ah, yeah.
This seems like a real OG in the field.
It was groundbreaking work.
Perry focused on college students and how they make sense of their educational experiences.
Interesting group to study.
His model, like several others, presents development as a sequential process. Picture it like climbing a ladder of understanding.
Okay, I can see that.
So tell me about the rungs on this ladder.
Sure.
Where does it all begin?
At the base, we have dualism.
Dualism.
Remember the time you were a kid and thought your teacher knew absolutely everything?
Oh, yeah, totally right.
They had all the answers?
My fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, she was like a walking encyclopedia in my eyes.
Classic dualism.
So that's what that is.
Knowledge is black and white, right or wrong, and authorities hold the ultimate truth.
Okay, makes sense.
Simple, right.
But eventually, that black and white view starts to fade, right?
Precisely.
What happens then?
You start climbing to the next rung. Multiplicity.
Multiplicity.
It's like that moment when you first encounter a debate with valid points on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
You realize, maybe there isn't always just one right answer.
Right.
Different opinions can exist.
I remember realizing that in college.
Okay.
It was mind-blowing and a little terrifying, honestly, to realize my professors didn't have all the answers.
It can be a shock.
So what do you do then?
Well, navigating that uncertainty is key to moving further up the ladder.
To where?
To relativism.
Relativism.
This stage goes beyond everyone has an opinion.
Okay.
You start to get that knowledge is contextual.
So it's deeper than just opinions.
Yes.
What else is there?
It's not just about accepting everything you hear,
Gotcha.
but evaluating different perspectives.
Makes sense.
And making judgments based on evidence and reasoning.
So it's less about who's right and more about understanding the how and why behind different perspectives.
Exactly.
And is that the top of the ladder?
Nope, there's one more rung.
Tell me about it.
The top rung of Perry's ladder is commitment within relativism.
Commitment within relativism.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
At this level, you're not just aware of different perspectives. You make informed choices based on your values and a deep understanding of the complexities of knowledge.
Commitment within relativism.
It's a mouthful, I know.
I love that.
What do you like about it?
It's like you're not just floating in a sea of opinions.
Yeah.
I've got your own compass guiding you.
A good way to put it.
But Perry was mostly studying dudes, right?
That's true. His research primarily focused on men.
What about women's experiences?
That's where Belenky and her colleagues come in.
Okay.
Their Women's Ways of Knowing model from 1986 was a direct response to Perry's work.
Makes sense.
And it emphasizes the source of knowledge.
Interesting.
It's especially relevant for anyone who's ever felt silenced or unsure of their voice.
Ooh. Haven't we all been there at some point?
I think so.
Tell me about these ways of knowing.
Okay.
Where does this model begin?
It starts with, silence.
Silence.
Think about a time you felt hesitant to speak up.
Okay.
Maybe doubted your own knowledge or felt your opinion didn't matter.
Yeah.
That feeling, that's the essence of silence.
I get it.
A lack of voice, a lack of confidence in one's knowledge.
Wow. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that.
I think we all can.
So how do we break free from that silence?
Often, the next step is received knowledge.
Receive knowledge.
This is when you rely heavily on external authorities for knowledge.
Okay.
Teachers, textbooks, experts.
So like the classic sources of knowledge.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing inherently wrong. It's just one step on the journey.
Okay.
It's about absorbing what you're told
Yeah, sure.
without necessarily questioning or analyzing it.
Okay, so it's like taking it all in, trusting the source.
Exactly.
But I imagine we need to move beyond just accepting everything we're told.
You got it.
What comes after that?
The next step is subjective knowledge.
Subjective knowledge.
This is where you start turning inward.
Interesting.
You begin trusting your own intuition and personal experience as valid ways of knowing.
Like my own unique perspective.
Yes, you realize your unique perspective matters.
So it's like realizing knowledge isn't just something out there, but something we create from our own experiences. And what happens next?
This leads to procedural knowledge,
Procedural knowledge.
where you start developing more formal methods of inquiry.
Oh. All right.
This stage has two sides, separate knowing and connected knowing.
Okay, those sound intriguing.
They are.
What's the difference between them?
Think of separate knowing as being objective, analytical.
Okay.
You value logic and critical thinking.
So like the scientific method.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And what about connected knowing?
Connected knowing, on the other hand, emphasizes empathy and understanding. It seeks truth through personal connection and care.
So separate knowing is like the cool-headed detective, while connected knowing is the empathetic friend trying to understand everyone's story.
That's a great way to put it.
So are those the two sides of procedural knowledge?
Yes.
And then what?
And finally, we reach constructed knowledge, the most advanced stage.
Constructed knowledge.
It's a big one.
What does that look like?
This is where you integrate different ways of knowing and recognize that you are an active participant in the process of constructing knowledge.
Constructed knowledge. It sounds like you're not just absorbing information, you're shaping it.
Exactly.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
Anything else about constructed knowledge?
Yes, you're aware that all knowledge is influenced by context.
Okay.
It's a dynamic process.
Right.
And you're right in the middle of it.
Okay, we've covered Perry and Belenky.
Two big ones.
What other models should we explore?
Let's look at Baxter Magolda's Epistemological reflection model from 1992.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one?
This was a study with both men and women,
Yes.
and she followed them over time.
Right, got it.
A longitudinal study.
Looking at how beliefs about knowledge evolve during the college years.
So did she find a similar progression like Perry's ladder?
In many ways, yes.
Oh.
Baxter Magolda identified 4 ways of knowing
4.
with some clear parallels to Perry's levels. It starts with absolute knowing.
Absolute knowing.
You trust authorities and knowledge is certain.
Sounds familiar.
Very similar to dualism.
Right, that classic black and white thinking.
Right.
What comes after that?
Transitional knowing.
Transitional knowing.
You begin to question authority,
Okay.
realizing knowledge can be uncertain.
Like realizing your professors don't know everything.
Kind of echoes Perry's multiplicity.
So you're starting to see cracks in the foundation.
Right.
What happens next?
Independent knowing.
Independent knowing.
You value your own opinions
Okay.
and engage in critical thinking.
Sounds good.
Moving away from just accepting what authorities say.
It's like stepping towards Perry's relativism.
You could say that.
Interesting.
It's interesting.
So each model is like a different path up the same mountain, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
They all lead towards a more nuanced understanding of knowledge.
I agree.
What's the peak of Baxter Magolda's model?
Contextual knowing.
Contextual knowing.
This is about judging evidence in context and constructing your own understanding based on a more holistic view.
So you're really using all those different ways of knowing.
Yes.
It aligns with Perry's commitment within relativism.
It's the top of the mountain.
Contextual knowing. Knowing sounds like you're really operating on a higher level there.
It's a sophisticated way of knowing.
But there's a twist with Baxter Magolda's model, right?
Yes, there is.
Didn't she also find something interesting about gender-related reasoning patterns?
Yes.
What did she find?
While men and women weren't segregated into different ways of knowing,
Okay.
Baxter Magolda observed they sometimes justified their beliefs differently.
Oh, interesting.
For example, with an absolute knowing, some women might explain their trust in authority through a received pattern,
Okay.
while some men might use a mastery pattern.
So it's not that men and women think differently.
Right.
but they might arrive at similar conclusions through different paths.
Exactly.
Baxter Magolda's work is a great reminder that there's diversity in how we develop these beliefs.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's tackle our next model. King and Kishner's reflective judgment model, published in 1994.
Okay.
This one sounds super detailed.
It is.
7 stages.
It's comprehensive.
This model zeroes in on how we approach those messy, real-life problems with no easy answers.
The tough stuff.
Think of it as a guide to navigating life's curveballs.
I like that.
Those curveballs.
We all know those.
We know those all too well.
They'll keep us on our toes.
What's different about how this model views epistemological development?
This one emphasizes epistemic cognition.
Epistemic cognition.
How we understand the process of knowing.
So metacognition about knowledge.
You could say that.
What's the difference?
It's not just what you know,
Okay.
but how you justify those beliefs and how you approach knowing itself.
So it's about becoming aware of our own mental software.
Exactly.
How do we decide what to believe?
That's the key question.
And how does this model answer that question?
Well, with 7 stages, this model acknowledges we don't always operate at our most sophisticated level.
That makes sense.
It introduces the concept of developmental range.
Developmental range, what does that mean?
It means you might operate at different stages depending on the situation.
So context matters.
Yes, very much so.
How so?
Some contexts push you to higher levels of reasoning,
Okay.
while others might have you falling back on simpler ways of knowing.
Interesting.
So it's not like you reach a certain stage and you're done.
Right.
We're all still works in progress.
Absolutely.
Now, for our last model today,
Okay.
we have Kuhn's argumentative reasoning from 1991.
Kuhn's argumentative reasoning.
This one focuses on reasoning in everyday life, which I find fascinating.
Reasoning in everyday life.
Yeah, like how we use these beliefs in our daily interactions.
That sounds a lot more relatable than some of those other models.
It is.
Tell me more.
Kuhn observed how people explain real-world problems.
Okay.
And noticed patterns in their underlying beliefs about knowledge. She argued that these beliefs directly influence how we argue and debate.
So our views about knowledge shape how we argue.
Exactly.
How'd that work?
Kuhn described 3 categories of epistemological views.
3 categories.
The first is the familiar absolutist.
Absolutist.
They believe knowledge is certain,
Okay.
and experts are the ultimate truth holders.
Okay, so the absolutists are back.
They never really went away.
What are the other categories?
Next is the multiplist.
The multiplist.
Think of this like a supercharged version of Perry's multiplicity.
Okay.
These folks reject expertise entirely.
Wow.
They believe everyone's opinion is equally valid.
Even if they have no idea what they're talking about.
It's like saying my opinion is as good as yours, even if you're a Nobel Prize winner.
Wow, that sounds like a recipe for some interesting disagreements.
It can be.
And what about the third category?
And finally, we have the most advanced category, the evaluative thinkers.
Evaluative?
The most sophisticated.
Okay, evaluative sounds promising.
They are.
What makes them different?
They recognize the value of expertise, but also evaluate it critically.
So they're not just blindly following experts.
Right.
What else?
They are open to changing their minds.
Open-minded.
Based on evidence and good arguments.
Sounds reasonable.
They engage in reasoned debate.
Okay.
And understand that knowledge is constantly evolving.
So they are open-minded and critical thinkers.
Yes, they embody that ideal.
That sounds like someone I want to have a conversation with.
Me too.
But exploring these models is raising a lot of questions for me.
That's a good thing.
It is.
It always does.
Oh.
That's what makes this field so interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many ongoing debates and questions
Right.
researchers are still grappling with.
Well, lucky for us, we've got more time to unpack those debates.
Yes, we do.
But before we wrap up part 1 of this episode,
Okay.
I want to leave you, dear listener, with something to ponder.
I like where this is going.
Have you ever experienced a major shift in your thinking?
A big change.
A time when your whole view of knowledge was turned upside down?
Thought-provoking.
We'll be back after a short break to hear your answers.
Those aha moments when your whole perspective shifts can be pretty powerful.
Yeah.
We've been talking about these big picture models of how our beliefs about knowledge develop.
Right.
But what does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Give us some concrete examples.
Okay, let's go back to Perry's scheme for a second.
Back to Perry.
Imagine you're a first-year college student, fresh out of high school.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
You're probably still rocking that dualistic viewpoint.
Yeah, I remember those days.
You trust your professors, believe the textbooks.
Uh-huh.
And you're searching for clear-cut answers.
Oh, man, I remember that feeling.
What was it like?
It's like, just tell me the right answer so I can ace this test.
Exactly.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
One answer.
But then college throws you a curveball.
Oh, yeah.
What happens?
Suddenly it's not so simple anymore.
Things get more complicated.
Yeah, way more complicated.
You start bumping into different perspectives in your classes.
Like what?
You're reading conflicting theories.
Yeah?
You've got classmates who challenge your assumptions.
Ooh, classmates?
Maybe even professors who are all about debate and critical thinking.
It's like your comfy little world of certainty gets shaken up.
Right.
And then what?
That's the transition to multiplicity.
Back to multiplicity.
You start to realize knowledge can be messy, uncertain.
Yeah.
There might be multiple valid perspectives on a single issue.
And that can be both exciting and kind of scary, right?
It can be both.
What's so exciting?
Exciting because it opens up new possibilities.
Oh, I see.
But scary because, well, the world feels less predictable.
And less safe.
Absolutely.
So what do you do?
How you deal with that uncertainty is key.
I'm listening.
Some people might cling to dualism.
Yeah, I bet.
But others embrace the challenge and move towards relativism.
So they start flexing those critical thinking muscles?
Exactly.
And learn how to evaluate different perspectives.
It's a process.
But how does that actually happen?
That's the question.
What pushes people up that ladder?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is there an answer?
Researchers are still figuring that out.
Oh, okay.
But based on what we know, exposure to diverse perspectives seems key.
So those lively classroom debates where everyone is going back and forth, challenging each other's ideas.
Yes.
What else?
Or even just reading stuff that presents different sides of an argument.
Okay.
When you're constantly exposed to different viewpoints,
right.
You're forced to think more deeply about your own beliefs.
So if I want to level up, I need to get out of my comfort zone.
I think so.
And listen to people I might not agree with.
That's a big part of it.
It's like, if you want to get smarter, surround yourself with people who make you think harder.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
That's crucial.
Okay, I'm taking notes here.
Good.
But let's step out of the classroom for a second.
Okay.
How does all this play out in real life, outside those academic walls?
It's everywhere.
Where? Give me an example.
Think about how you make decisions.
Big topic.
Give me a decision you have to make.
Let's say you're deciding whether to invest in some new technology for your business.
Okay. Big decision.
Huge decision.
If you're operating from that dualistic perspective,
The simplest level.
you might just ask one trusted expert
Keep it simple, right?
and base your decision solely on their opinion.
One expert, one answer.
Right. But what happens if you've leveled up?
Meaning?
Epistemologically speaking.
Oh, okay.
Well, at the multiplicity stage,
The next level.
you might seek out multiple experts,
So, more opinions.
but then get stuck trying to synthesize that information.
So more information doesn't necessarily lead to better decisions.
Not always.
That come.
It can lead to analysis paralysis.
Too many choices.
Right.
So what's the best way?
But if you've reached relativism,
Relativists.
you're not just gathering opinions.
What else you do?
You're evaluating them critically.
What does that involve?
You're thinking about the source, the evidence, potential biases.
So you're approaching it like a detective.
Exactly.
Weighing the evidence, drawing your own conclusion.
Losing all your skills.
And what about commitment within relativism?
That's the highest level.
What's different there?
At commitment within relativism, you're doing all that, plus integrating your own values and goals into the decision-making process.
Because sometimes logic isn't enough.
Right.
We need to factor in our gut feelings and what feels right for us.
Absolutely.
So understanding your own epistemological development can help you make better decisions.
It can.
Not just in school.
But in all areas of life.
Wow, I'm seeing how this stuff is way more practical than I initially thought.
Yes.
It's a secret weapon for navigating the complexities of the world.
I like that analogy.
A secret weapon.
And the cool thing is,
What's that?
we're just scratching the surface.
Meaning?
There's so much more to explore in the field of personal epistemological development.
Well, lucky for us, we've got another part to this episode.
Yes, we do.
But before we move on,
Okay.
we want you to think about this.
Okay, listener, listen up.
When you're faced with a tough decision, how do you approach it?
What's your process?
Do you go with your gut?
Or maybe something else?
Seek expert advice.
What works for you?
Maybe do a little of both.
We'll be back after a short break to hear your answers.
It's fascinating to think about all the different ways we approach decisions, right?
It is, yeah.
It makes you realize
What does it make you realize?
there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not.
But speaking of different approaches,
Okay.
what's really exciting about this whole field
What's that?
is the potential for applying these theories to real-world challenges.
Absolutely.
It's not just theoretical.
Right. It goes beyond the textbooks.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Right.
Tell me more about these applications.
Well, think about education, for starters.
Okay, education.
If we understand how students develop their beliefs about knowledge, we can design learning experience
What kind of learning experiences?
that encourage more sophisticated thinking.
So it's not just about stuffing their brains with facts,
No, it's more than that.
but teaching them how to think critically about those facts.
Exactly.
So how do we do that?
Imagine a classroom where questioning is encouraged,
Oh, okay, I like that.
where students are challenged to evaluate evidence and construct their own understanding.
That sounds way more engaging than those rote memorization days back in my school days.
I agree.
It does.
It's about fostering lifelong learners,
Instead of what?
not just test takers.
And is this only for kids in school?
And this approach isn't limited to traditional classrooms.
Okay, good.
It's relevant for learners of all ages, in all settings.
Right, because we're all constantly learning and growing,
We are.
whether we're in school or just trying to make sense of the world around us.
Exactly.
And speaking of making sense of the world,
Okay.
these theories also have applications in fields like journalism and media literacy.
Oh, that's interesting.
I can see how understanding how people form beliefs about knowledge
Yes.
is crucial in today's media landscape.
It's more important than ever
How so?
with the constant flood of information.
Right, it's overwhelming.
We need to be able to critically evaluate sources,
Makes sense.
identify biases, and form our own informed opinions.
We need to become epistemological superheroes,
I love
fighting misinformation.
protecting truth and knowledge.
So how do we do that?
And to be an epistemological superhero, you need to know your own strengths and weaknesses as a knower.
So it's about being self-aware,
Yes.
understanding our own biases and what influences our beliefs.
Exactly.
And that's what's so great about this deep dive.
I agree.
It's given us a framework for understanding these complex processes.
And hopefully some tools to use in our own lives.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Good.
And speaking of thinking,
Yes.
do you have any resources you recommend for our listeners who want to dive even deeper?
Absolutely.
Great.
We'll include links to articles, books, and other resources in the show notes.
Awesome.
Be sure to check them out.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From those early theories of personal epistemological development
The foundation.
to the latest research and how it applies to our lives.
It's an exciting field.
It is.
And it's constantly evolving.
And for me, the biggest takeaway is this.
What is it?
Understanding how we know what we know
It's fundamental.
is essential for becoming better learners,
Yes.
thinkers, and decision makers.
I couldn't agree more.
It's about moving beyond simplistic black and white thinking
Right.
and embracing the beautiful complexity of knowledge.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It's about recognizing that knowledge is a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
And we're all constantly evolving in our understanding.
Always learning, always growing.
And with that thought in mind,
Okay.
we want to leave you with a final question to ponder.
A challenge for our listener.
If you could design an educational experience that helped people develop more sophisticated beliefs about knowledge,
Interesting.
what would it look like?
That's a great question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.